Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happened on The View this morning stunned everyone watching. For years, Joy Behar has weathered every argument, every shouting match, every tense moment at that table. But no one expected this. No one expected Gary Oldman to walk into the studio with a calm smile, sit down across from Joy, and trigger one of the most explosive exchanges the show has seen in a decade. The topic started simply enough. Is the government hiding too much under the label classified? But the moment Joy challenged Gary's stance, everything changed. He leaned in with that razor-sharp intensity he's known for on screen and said, "Joy, you don't have to play the government's lawyer. They already have plenty." That single line set off a chain reaction. Joy's jaw tightened. The audience gasped. Sara froze mid-sip of her coffee. And from that point forward, nothing could pull the conversation back to safety. What began as a debate turned into a blowout. Words sharpened, accusations flew, cameras zoomed in on clenched fists, narrowed eyes, and stunned expressions. And then, the unthinkable happened. Joy Behar stood up, pulled off her mic, and said a sentence no fan of The View ever expected to hear. By the time she walked off stage, viewers across the country were left speechless, and the internet already on fire. The episode didn't start like a disaster. In fact, it opened with one of the warmest, most relaxed intros the show had done all week. Joy walked out first, waving to the crowd as the audience clapped and cheered. Her energy was light, joking, even playful. If anything, she looked relieved to have a guest she genuinely admired. Gary Oldman entered next. The crowd gave him a long, enthusiastic round of applause. He grinned shyly, the way he always does, and reached out to hug Joy. She hugged back, patting her shoulder. Whatever storm was coming, neither of them showed a hint of it yet. "Gary, you look great," Joy said as they sat down. "You look like you just walked off a movie set where you played someone important." Gary laughed. "I play so many important people, I'm starting to think I should run for office just to balance the universe." The audience loved that. Sara chimed in with a teasing smile. "Imagine your campaign ads. You'd never know if you were watching Gary the actor or Gary the politician." Gary shrugged dramatically. "As long as the lighting is good, who cares?" Joy actually snorted laughing. It was the kind of easy, honest laugh she rarely gives on camera. They spent the first few minutes chatting about his latest project, a historical drama that had the whole table talking about costumes, long shooting days, and how he manages to completely disappear into every character he plays. Gary told a story about messing up a take because he sneezed right in the middle of a dramatic monologue. The whole panel burst out laughing. Joy leaned back in her chair, smiling. "See, this is why we love having you here. You're brilliant, but you're also normal. You sneeze." "I sneeze," Gary repeated solemnly. "I am but human." It was all easy banter, loose, warm, comfortable. Sonny asked about his family, and Gary spoke sweetly about his kids, how they're growing up too fast, and how he tries to keep their lives as normal as possible despite his unpredictable schedule. He even teased that his youngest said he looked too serious in his last movie poster. Whoopi chuckled. "Kids will take you down faster than any critic." "Every time," Gary said. Joy nodded knowingly. "That's the real world keeping you humble." For a moment, it felt like a standard, cheerful interview. No tension, no nerves, just Gary being charming and Joy being in good spirits. But then, the producer's cue card slid across the table. The next segment was coming. The topic. The shift didn't happen instantly, but something in Joy's posture changed. She straightened a little. Gary noticed, but didn't comment. He picked up his mug, casual as ever. She glanced at her notes. No one in that room understood the spark they were seconds away from striking. If the opening felt friendly, it was because neither of them had touched the live wire yet. The question that would turn this warm conversation into one of the most unexpected and explosive moments The View has aired in years. The cameras returned from commercial, and the studio felt a subtle shift. The warmth of earlier conversation was fading. Joy sat upright, her notes in front of her, eyes fixed on Gary Oldman as though sizing up his every word. Gary, calm and collected, leaned back slightly, taking in the audience's energy before addressing the first real point. "So, Gary," Joy began, her tone polite but with an undercurrent of challenge, "you've said repeatedly that the government classifies too much information. Don't you think some secrecy is necessary for national security?" Gary tilted his head, letting a small smile tug at his lips. "Necessary, yes. Blanket secrecy, no. If you classify everything, the system becomes unaccountable. Citizens have a right to know what's going on, especially when decisions affect their lives directly." A murmur rippled through the audience. Joy raised an eyebrow, clearly ready for battle. "And who decides what affects the public? You? Congress? Some faceless bureaucrat?" Gary's voice stayed steady, measured. "Not me, but the principle is simple. Transparency should outweigh convenience. Too often, classified is just a shield to avoid scrutiny." The tension in the room started to build. Joy leaned forward, her pen tapping the table. "So what? You want open government? No confidentiality at all? That sounds reckless." Gary's eyes narrowed slightly. Reckless would be hiding wrongdoing under the guise of protection. Real security comes with accountability. Without it, trust erodes, and without trust, the whole system collapses. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the first sparks of a live confrontation. Some nodded, murmuring in agreement. Others frowned, unsure if Gary was overstepping. Joy's voice sharpened. "You're talking as if every secret decision is corrupt. Do you really believe the government is hiding scandal behind every document stamped classified?" Gary leaned in now, intensity creeping into his tone. "I believe that some information is labeled secret not to protect citizens, but to protect the people in power from accountability. The moment secrecy outweighs public interest, you have a problem, and that problem is bigger than you or me. It affects everyone." Gasps echoed through the studio. Sara glanced at the co-hosts, sensing the rising tension. The audience was split, half captivated by Gary's conviction, half holding their breath at the pointed critique. Joy shook her head, exhaling sharply. "You're being dramatic, Gary. The world is complicated. Some things need to be confidential, and that doesn't make it a cover-up." Gary's lips tightened. "Being dramatic is pointing out the truth. Citizens can't weigh risks if information is hidden. The balance is broken, Joy. Too often, classified is just a blanket excuse to avoid questions, investigations, even basic oversight." Joy leaned forward, voice clipped, eyes flashing. "You're making it sound like the system is rotten. Are you trying to scare people?" Gary held her gaze, calm but unwavering. "I'm trying to wake them up. Ignorance isn't safety, it's vulnerability. When the public is kept in the dark, democracy suffers." The room grew noticeably tense. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded, murmuring agreement. The co-hosts exchanged glances. Whoopi raised a hand, a gentle signal to pause, but the current was unstoppable. Joy's tone turned sharper, bordering on personal. "So what's your solution? Tear down every classified wall? Throw caution to the wind?" Gary's expression softened slightly, but remained firm. "Not at all. Protect what truly matters, but don't let fear, convenience, or power dictate what citizens can see. Oversight exists for a reason, and it only works if people are informed." The audience reacted audibly, applause mixed with scattered murmurs. Some were cheering the clarity, others questioning the critique. The division in energy mirrored the split in the room. Joy leaned back, folding her arms, a tight smile on her face. "You're preaching idealism, Gary, but the real world doesn't work that way. Some things are just secret, period." Gary's gaze stayed locked at her, calm but unwavering. "Secrecy should never be the default, Joy. Transparency should be. If we get that wrong, we risk everything citizens rely on: trust, accountability, and the very democracy we're meant to protect." The applause rose again, louder this time. Some stood, some murmured. The tension between them was palpable, the friendly rapport of minutes ago replaced by a high-stakes ideological duel. And at that moment, it was clear this debate had gone far beyond politeness. The spark had been struck. The clash had truly begun.
The applause had barely died down when Gary leaned forward, his expression shifting from calm to something more urgent. The studio, once buzzing with polite curiosity, had gone quiet. Every eye was on him. "You know, I didn't come here to lecture. I came here because I've seen what happens when information is hidden, not just politically, but in ways that affect real lives." His voice had a weight that silenced the audience, even Joy. Joy's pen paused mid-tap. "Real lives? Explain that," she said, her tone clipped but curious. Gary inhaled deeply. "Years ago, I worked on a project documenting government policies that were technically classified but had consequences for everyday citizens. Families didn't know why their children's schools were underfunded, why health programs disappeared, why local projects stalled. The decisions were hidden under secrecy. People suffered quietly, thinking it was inevitable." The audience murmured, some leaning in, some shaking their heads in disbelief. You could feel the energy in the studio shift from debate to reflection. He continued, voice quieter but stronger. "I met a mother who had no idea why her son's medical treatments were delayed for months. Every official kept telling her it was classified. Every time she asked, she was given excuses. That's when I realized, when governments hide behind secrecy, the public loses more than information. They lose trust. They lose hope." Joy leaned back, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. I can't even imagine how that feels," she admitted, her usual sharpness replaced by a pause that hung heavily in the air. Gary's gaze softened but remained piercing. "That's the point, Joy. These aren't abstract debates about documents stamped classified. These are lives, families, communities. People count on transparency, even if they don't always know it. And when it's withheld, it's not protection, it's neglect." The studio was silent. Even Whoopi, always ready with a quip, simply nodded. The audience seemed suspended, caught between shock and understanding. Joy finally spoke, her voice lower than before. "So, you're saying the secrecy, it's personal, not just politics?" Gary's jaw tightened slightly. "Exactly. I've spent decades portraying people whose lives were affected by secrecy. Journalists, spies, ordinary citizens. I've seen families torn apart because someone decided information was off-limits. It's easy to debate this from a distance, but I've watched it destroy trust firsthand. That's why I push back. That's why it matters to me personally." The audience reacted audibly this time. Soft gasps, murmurs of agreement, some nodding. The debate had shifted from policy to human consequence. Gary had pulled everyone into a deeply personal space without raising his voice. Joy exhaled, looking down at her notes for a long moment, then back up at him. I didn't expect that," she admitted quietly. "It's one thing to talk policy, but another to see the people behind it." Gary leaned back, a faint, grim smile tugging at his lips. "That's why transparency isn't just a political point, it's a moral one. When information is withheld without necessity, someone, somewhere, suffers, and silence only amplifies it." The tension lingered, but it had shifted. The clash was no longer a contest of ideals, it was a confrontation with reality. The audience could feel the gravity of what had been shared. Joy's tone softened further. Maybe I've been too focused on the arguments and not enough on the consequences." Gary nodded subtly. "It's easy to get lost in ideology,
But real lives don't wait for debates to be settled. They feel the impact every day. The applause that followed was slower this time, thoughtful, filled with weight and reflection rather than mere reaction. Even the co-host seemed moved, the energy in the studio tense but human. For a moment, the show was no longer about who was right or wrong. It was about acknowledging the cost of secrecy and the responsibility that comes with power. And in that silence, Gary had made it personal and unforgettable.
The studio lights seemed brighter now, casting sharper shadows across the table as tension built. Gary Oldman sat upright, eyes fixed on Joy Behar, who leaned forward, her pen tapping impatiently against her notes. The friendly chatter from earlier had completely dissolved. "So, Gary," Joy said, her tone cutting, "you've made it personal. You've shared stories, painted images of suffering. But aren't you oversimplifying? Not every classified label hides wrongdoing. Some of it is legitimately sensitive. You're acting like the government is out to deceive everyone." Gary's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not saying every document is nefarious, Joy. I'm saying the default secrecy is dangerous. Blanket secrecy removes accountability. It's convenient for those in power, but it harms the people it's meant to serve." Joy's voice rose slightly. "Convenient for those in power? That's a pretty bold accusation on national television." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some gasped, some whispered. The energy was electric. Gary leaned forward now, the calm precision replaced with an intensity that filled the room. "Bold? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. You sit here asking if I'm overreacting, but look around. How many times have whistleblowers been silenced, journalists threatened, citizens denied the truth? The system hides behind classified because it can, not because it should." Joy's eyes flashed. "So your answer is what? Tear down the system? Let everyone see everything?" Gary's voice tightened, controlled but firm. "Not everything, but information that impacts public lives should never be hidden for convenience or political gain. When transparency is sacrificed for secrecy, people pay the price, and that's unacceptable." The audience audibly reacted. Some clapped, some gasped. The tension between the co-hosts became palpable. Whoopi tried to interject softly, Okay, let's take a breath." But Gary wasn't finished. "Joy," he said, his voice rising slightly, "you talk about sensitivity, but I've seen the results of this secrecy firsthand. Families denied health care, communities left in the dark, policies passed without oversight. When you prioritize secrecy over accountability, the consequences aren't abstract. They're real and they're devastating." Joy's jaw tightened, her tone sharp, almost incredulous. "You're painting it like the system is rotten to its core. That's unfair, Gary. Governments operate under rules, legal frameworks, oversight committees." Gary's eyes narrowed. "And yet those committees are kept in the dark too. Classified information prevents scrutiny. The system is only as good as the information citizens can access, and right now, that access is far too limited." The audience erupted in a mixture of applause and murmurs, divided. Some were clearly supporting Gary's fiery stance, others unsettled by the intensity of the exchange. Whoopi slammed her notes down lightly, the snap echoing in the studio. "You're being dramatic. You're turning a conversation about governance into an emotional tirade." Gary leaned back, taking a slow breath. "Dramatic? No. Honest. People's lives are affected, Joy. That's reality. And pretending it's not happening doesn't make it safer, it makes it worse." The room went quiet, tension thick enough to feel in the air. The co-hosts exchanged glances. Whoopi raised her hand, trying again to calm the storm. "Gary, maybe we can—" Gary cut in, his tone unwavering. "I'm done sugarcoating it. Secrecy shouldn't be a shield for mistakes or power. When it is, it betrays the people it's meant to protect. That's the truth, and it's worth saying even if it makes people uncomfortable." The audience responded with a mixture of standing applause and gasps. Some viewers cheered, some whispered fervently. Whoopi sat back, arms crossed, visibly taken aback, her expression a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect. For a long moment, silence fell over the table. The debate had escalated beyond policy. It had become a confrontation of values, urgency, and moral responsibility. Gary's words had landed like a weight, shaking the comfortable distance that usually separates debate from reality. The breaking point had arrived. The clash was no longer just televised discussion. It was a raw exposure of convictions, a powerful reminder that the cost of secrecy was more than just hidden documents.
The applause slowly faded, leaving a heavy, thoughtful quiet in the studio. Gary Oldman sat back, his eyes calm but resolute, while Joy Behar stared down at her notes, her usual spark of retort muted. For a moment, the show had transcended entertainment. It had become a mirror reflecting a reality most Americans rarely confronted. Whoopi leaned forward gently. "That was powerful. Are you all right, Joy?" she asked softly, her tone careful but probing. Joy exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping her lips, one that carried more reflection than humor. "I didn't expect him to hit so hard, so personally. Hearing what he's seen, the people affected by secrecy, it makes the debate feel real in a way I hadn't thought about." Gary, ever composed, gave a small nod to Joy. "The discussion isn't about me, Joy. It's about those whose voices never get heard because rules of secrecy silence them." The audience, still seated, shifted uneasily, absorbing the gravity of what had just unfolded. Social media feeds were already lighting up with clips from the show. #SecrecyKills, #TruthMatters, #Gary Oldman on The View trending across platforms. Comments poured in. "Never thought about how much secrecy affects ordinary people. This is more than politics. This is morality." Joy Behar looked genuinely moved. "That says it all." Joy looked up at the camera, her voice softer, more measured than usual. "I gave Gary a hard time today, but maybe that's the point of conversations like this. They push us to see beyond our assumptions, to understand the human cost behind policies and labels we often take for granted." Gary stood, offering a small, respectful nod to the co-hosts and audience. "I don't expect everyone to agree with me. I only hope we remember that behind every classified document, every sensitive label, there are real people whose lives are impacted. That's why transparency matters. That's why accountability matters." The applause that followed was quiet but heartfelt, a mix of reflection and respect. The show ended not with a clash, but with a reminder that debates can be fiery, confrontations intense, but at their best, they force us to confront truths that matter. For Gary and Joy, the argument had ended, but the conversation had only just begun. Which side are you on? Drop your thoughts below. Like if you believe transparency should never be optional. Subscribe for more unforgettable celebrity debates and real-life discussions.